Good morning, everyone. We're just going to wait a minute or two just to enable a few more people to join us, and then we'll get going. Okay, I think we've got the majority of the people that are hoping to join us this morning. Oh, I can just see a couple more, give them a chance to get in. Okay, that's lovely. So good morning, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, our second webinar in our Thought Leadership series. And today we're going to be looking at understanding the new Ofsted framework. Just before we get started, just a few little housekeeping elements. So we do have the chat function and the Q&A function available for you. So we will be monitoring those throughout the session, and then we will pick up on questions at the end. We may not have time for all of them, and we apologise if that's the case, but what we will do in the follow-up is we'll address all of your questions and anything else that you may want to consider. So I'm Louise Pink, and I'm one of the customer optimization managers here at ESS Sims, and presenting for us today is my colleague Steve Long. And I think, Steve, it's over to you.
Thanks very much, Louise. Good morning, everybody. Hopefully you can hear me. I'm going to be talking today about the new Ofsted framework. Hopefully you'll find some of the things interesting or enlightening about this new framework. The new framework was introduced last month in September. It had a delayed start. Inspections were paused for a variety of reasons to allow training of inspectors and to give schools a chance to engage with the new Ofsted inspection framework, but it's now fully up and running. What I want to do is I want to talk about how it came to being. I'm not going to dwell on this. I think we know, don't we, that due to the tragic death of Ruth Perry and the Parliament and combination of things, actually, including the appointment of Sir Martin Oliver, the new His Majesty's Chief Inspector of Schools, and Amanda Spielman, who departed as HMCI. There was quite a period of change, and Sir Martin came in wanting to introduce a series of measures to reassure confidence around Ofsted. And one of the first things he did, of course, was the big listen. You can see what he said there. It was about resetting relationships and really reaching out to a variety of stakeholders for their considered views about what Ofsted is and what it does as part of this big listen. Again, I'm not going to go through line by line about what the big listen was or what the outcomes of that were. I'm going to touch on some of them, but I'm really interested to see how they fed into the new Ofsted framework and what that's going to mean for schools. But yes, about this resetting our relationship with the sectors we inspect and regulate, I think is the main point there. Obviously, when the big listen was published and the outcomes of the big listen were published, there was a variety of responses from the usual newspapers, publications. You're going to get a variety. For some, it was a step too far. For some, it was a not far enough. Hopefully, somewhere you sit, your view is somewhere in the middle there. So we know that teachers' unions have taken on board some of the things that have been said and have welcomed some of the changes. One of the interesting ones when I was looking and preparing for this was the Bell Foundation. The Bell Foundation, you could look at the Bell Foundation for yourself. Very much part of talking through what changes need to be made to make sure that a variety of stakeholders can access school reports that Ofsted publish and things like that. And one of the points they made, one I actually made in a response to the big listen, was that there are a lot of parents out there who don't speak English as their first language, who might find it really tricky to access what communication from school, including inspection reports. One of the things they've recommended is that this is really much considered by Ofsted about how they can get translations of these reports in the hands of communities where there could be large numbers of non-English speakers as first language, who you want to engage with schooling, because these are the children who are struggling at school and attendance in the first place. So it's really interesting to look at the Bell Foundation's comments around there, which actually echo some thoughts I had when I fed back to it. It was a really comprehensive survey. I mean, the numbers, are much, much more significant, I think, than any other surveys I've experienced in terms of Ofsted consultation. And included within that were practitioners, inspectors, many of whom are, of course, practitioners, and children. So the response, there was a huge amount of responses, and it was really thoughtfully done about how we could engage with the maximum amount of stakeholders out there to gather as much information about what people's concerns were around Ofsted, or what their positive views were as well. And out of it came this commitment to change. I'm going to dwell on some of these things later, but just highlighting some of these. Reference to early years inspection and regulatory frameworks, about making some changes there to make sure that is tighter, that is more appropriate, that is fit for purpose. The introduction of report cards. That's not going to happen just yet, but report cards for every school that has been inspected. Not too sure what they're going to look like. There's some ideas around there. But some other thoughts around early years and childcare places, which are a real premium, as we know. So certainly that early years focus was part of that commitment to change. Other areas, we know the challenges of the rising numbers of pupils with special educational needs and or disabilities. So those report cards need to reflect that. We also need to think about how any kind of new inspection framework, and there's talk about a new inspection framework being published possibly next year, to look very, very carefully about, SEND is threaded through the current inspection framework, but how more effectively can that be done? Alternative provision as well, the large amounts of pupils in alternative provision receiving support and guidance in alternative provision. So how can that be bolstered as well? Some thoughts around, unregistered alternative provision. Those schools use both registered and unregistered. So how can unregistered provision be brought into the fold, as it were, to be inspected? One of the interesting ones is about this Ofsted Academy. I'll talk about that in a minute, and a commitment really to end illegal schools. I think that several previous HMCIs have been very keen to look at how the government passes legislation in order to challenge that, and something around area SEND inspections as well. So there's a real commitment to Ofsted field force there about how things are going to be changed and wanting them to change. It's a real culture change, though, isn't it? It's making that. If you're going to reassure people that Ofsted is fit for purpose, you're going to have to make some serious changes in order to reassure people that, one, they have been listened to, and two, that those changes are going to be put into practice. So with immediate effect then, what has happened is, I think the biggest one, the one that really hit the headlines here, was the removal of this overall effectiveness judgment for state schools. And within that, we obviously early years provision in state schools and academies is there for children aged 2 and above. So they're included in removal of that as well, maintain nursery schools. Other early years settings will continue to receive those overall effectiveness grades, and independent schools are not yet under this remit. They will still have overall effectiveness grades. Big change. There may be schools who in the past have received requires improvement or inadequate judgments. So what's going to happen there? Well, in those inadequate ones, they may be already moves towards change in leadership and management in those schools. And in fact, it might be the case in requires improvement schools. But one of the changes that's being brought to bear on that is regional improvement teams to support those schools and requires improvement. And in future, those schools will receive support from higher performing schools as part of the new Ofsted framework. Notification calls on a Monday. Many inspections happen on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, but not all. Some happen Wednesdays and Thursdays. So one of the things, I mean, this has already started about making those notification calls on Monday, but for all schools will receive notification calls. I think it's after 9:30 on a Monday morning that they will be inspected that week. And of course, those who are being inspected on Tuesday and Wednesday, there are follow-up calls to discuss with leaders about the nature of the inspection, what's going to happen. The focus from the EIF from the past or around curriculum and early reading is going to stay. It's going to be part of inspections to focus on curriculum and early reading, but there are some subtle differences which I'll talk about later about how that might happen. Ofsted's piloting currently complaints panels for schools and early years providers. Until the pilot outcomes are known, can't comment on that, but that's something they've put in place about these complaints panels, because complaints is an area that people who responded to the big lesson felt very passionately about. 6 national hubs, so 6 regional hubs are going to take on some of the work and Ofsted, and they're going to specialise in particular areas of Ofsted's remit to support nationally. One of the biggest changes, though, is about opening up this Ofsted Academy. So the Ofsted Academy, really to pass on, well, what we know, the research and guidance and expertise of the inspectorate to schools, in a spirit of openness and transparency. So it isn't hidden away. It isn't in a black box somewhere that can't be challenged. So this Ofsted Academy is going to be sharing information, providing best practice to practitioners out there, being more transparent and sharing training about how inspections work and all of that guidance and research that goes with it. And a key one that's going to happen now, that there is that safeguarding grace period where safeguarding concerns emerge in an inspection, where the inspectors have concerns about safeguarding in practice rather than in theory. There is now a grace period where inspections can be paused and schools are given an opportunity to reflect on the findings there and actually address some of those safeguarding concerns before the inspection continues and the inspection finishes and the report is published. Now, there's always been a little bit of an element in safeguarding for things like single central record, where if there are administrative errors, school has a little bit of time during the inspection to consider those and to correct those. We're talking here possibly about some of those cases, but I think maybe some more serious safeguarding issues that can be addressed in this grace period, and schools have welcomed that. So from September 2025, again, there's no detail really emerging on these. There were some thoughts around what's going to be on the report cards. But one of the things is transcribing those final feedback meetings. So what happens in an inspection when day 1, day 2, there are these team meetings where the inspection evidence is shared with leaders and leaders can make their own notes about what is said. The final feedback meeting with those representatives from possibly local authority or governance inspectors, lead inspectors, share a summary of those thoughts and evidence that was shared with leaders. Again, notes are able to be taken in those meetings, but we don't actually provide anything in terms of that final feedback. So I think schools have welcomed, an actual record of what is said in those. How that's going to be recorded, whether it's going to be written or whether it's going to be recorded on audio or video or electronically, I don't know. But I think that's a more robust system really about recording that final feedback. So schools have got an accurate record of what is said. Report cards will probably contain the judgments, but there are other considerations, as we've already mentioned, around SEND and inclusion possibly, which might happen be added to those report cards. From September 2025, also phase appropriate frameworks for 16 and for early years. Now, those of you with long memories, these used to exist, but everything was brought together under the EIF, where it was all in one framework and one handbook. But the recommendation is to separate these out again. So again, from September 2025. Longer term, MATs and LA inspections has been mooted. Now, there are summary inspections of MATs already, but whether this is an extension of that thinking, I'm not sure at the moment. But it's been a suggestion that, the extension of these to look into MATs, to look across local authorities, might be something that Ofsted is going to be considering longer term. Now, you're going to hear me talk about it, but, if you want to hear Ofsted talking about it, what I've included here was from the Ofsted's YouTube channel, actually, Sue Morris-King and some colleagues talking about all the changes to do with the new framework and the findings of the big listen. I really recommend you watching that. So the details are here if you want them. We'll share these slides later, I'm sure. So I'm going to talk a little bit about graded inspections. I suppose one of the most surprising things that came out of the big listen is this single word judgments aren't working for parents or schools. I mean, one of the surveys found that in less than 4 in 10 parents and 29% of teachers supported single word judgments, obviously thinking that there's far more to what's happening in school and all of the positives than just these single word judgments. So the overall effectiveness judgment we know has gone, but some things remain. And I'm just going to talk you through, for graded inspections, a bit more detail around ungraded inspections, some of the things that stay, some of the things that have changed. So one of the things, well, this is what you need to provide to the lead inspector and the team by 8 a.m. on the day of the inspection. This jumps about a bit within the school inspection handbook. It's currently in paragraph 112, and I've spoken about this many times around, whatever MIS you're using, whether it's Sims or another MIS out there. Lot of the stuff which you're going to be looking at in order to provide for inspectors, you can get straight out of your MIS, particularly these records and information about behaviour and attendance at the bottom there. So a lot of this, if it's lists of staff, whether it's pupil lists, the inspectors need to have to make some decisions about who they're going to speak to, but certainly the reporting element there is still there. Just want to dwell on attendance. We've had a few changes to attendance, haven't we? And MIS providers have had to adapt their MISs to accommodate the changes, particularly though the changes recommended as statutory changes by the DfE. So the columns, if you're in the paragraphs, if you're interested, just to look at those within the school inspection handbook, the 315 to 318, not much of a change there really, but it talks about analysis. Well, analysis is more than just printing off a report. It's consideration and some sort of soul searching as to why this is the case. So inspectors are going to be, and that may be something that's in your self-evaluation, which you may want to share with inspectors. It may be something within the school improvement plan, which again, you might want to share with the lead inspector. But it's here, and it's about, what can schools reasonably do to improve attendance and reduce persistent absence in a school. Yeah, so more here. If you have pupils who are using alternative provision, there may be a requirement to actually go and see those in an inspection, or certainly to look at the records or to talk to leaders about how you ensure good attendance, as well as curriculum, obviously, and support for pupils with attending alternative provision. But all of these things, you need to be ready to answer all of these things and to have the data to hand and to have the narrative really about what's happening in your school to do with attendance. Just wanted to share a little bit because there is some confusion still in schools about part-time timetables. Now, part-time timetables are very much something that inspectors will ask around. So just a reminder really from the DfE guidance way back in May 2023, what the circumstances should be for granting part-time tables. And I think the phrase is they're very limited. They certainly should be reviewed when they should happen. I suppose questions that need to be asked around this are, it may be the case that the part-time timetable is appropriate while an SEND assessment is being taken place around the needs of particular pupils. But inspectors are going to want to know who are the pupils, SEND, looked after, pupil premium or not. How part-time is part-time? Might be a question they might ask. And how do you ensure the safeguarding arrangements are in place when the child is not at school? What's the timetable in place for these pupils? Who decided it? Have you exhausted all other avenues before you decided on part-time? What are the curriculum arrangements? So the school has agreed on the pupil being absent. It's authorised. So the coding needs to be correct. It's not a B code. In the new codes that need to be used for this type of attendance, it's going to be a C2. It's not going to be B. It's not supervised by the school, so it's going to have to be a CT2 code. The other one, of course, which sometimes catches schools out, is this flexi schooling. Don't know if there's something happening in your school or if you know about this, but it's to do with elective home education where a parent has chosen to educate their child at home. So they are responsible for the education of their children. Therefore, it's authorised absence. It's not an approved off-site activity. The school, it may be a circumstance where, because of the curriculum provision, a child might come into school a short period of time every week to access things which are going to be more challenging to provide at home: science, drama, DT, things like this, PE, but they may attend for part of a week. But as I said, the parent is responsible for that education, but they've brokered something with the school so that they can fill those gaps. The school has no supervisory there, so that role can't be a C2. One point to mention, though, inspections do ask about the performance of all pupils, and that includes those who have flexi school arrangements. So schools need to be ready to answer those questions and provide their evidence. And those coding is going to be really, really important, to rule out any consideration really of gaming, this, inaccurately recording attendance with the wrong codes. Particularly, there's been some changes to some of those codes. So I just mentioned that one in passing. That's something obviously inspectors are going to be using. So that no other changes really. So you're still going to have a deep dive methodology with ungraded inspections. Most things are going to stay the same. The overall effectiveness judgment is going to be removed. There are some other changes slight minor changes in those graded inspections. But it's those ungraded inspections which really are going to be the ones where there is the most significant changes are going to be in place as of now. And it says in the guidance in the school inspection handbook about it, where it mentions the fact there won't be deep dives, but then it talks about, inspectors usually focus on, well, it's usually they'll focus on in those familiar areas: leadership and management, quality of education, behaviour, attendance, and personal development, or not necessarily all of them, but many of those. But they're going to do it in slightly different ways. That deep dive methodology is not applied any longer in those ungraded inspections. And in fact, there was an area that there used to be something called spotlight areas in ungraded inspections, which focused on behaviour, about leadership and management and personal development as well. And attendance actually was added as things move forward. But those have been removed. Some have got concerns about those being removed and the implications, which I'll talk about later on. But again, attendance, key issue here. Inspectors usually focus on, well, is the school doing everything it reasonably can to achieve highest possible attendance? Again, could be a focus there, particularly if in your previous inspection report, one of the areas for improvement is this. I mean, here's one, I've written this a few times, too many actually. Where schools attendance is not good enough. So if it's certainly from the previous inspection report, it talks about many pupils do not attend regularly enough. Well, don't be too surprised if in an ungraded inspection that is a key focus area for inspection. So these areas of focus then, what are they? Well, they still allow inspectors to collect evidence, to connect it together, and to consider what that evidence is telling them. But in ungraded inspections, it allows far more flexibility in how that happens. You're not bolted down to a deep dive methodology where certain things need to happen at certain times. There's much more freedom for a lead inspector to construct what happens with leaders based on the context of the school and those conversations they're going to have far more than they were able to. That's one absolutely key change. So instead of that deep dive methodology where you might be looking at a curriculum subject such as art or mathematics or drama or music or whatever, subjects will be inspected as a group to focus on a particular theme rather than individually. Inspectors are allowed to choose 3 or 4 areas of focus in an ungraded inspection, and a lot of the evidence gathered will be on day one. Obviously, if it's a day one inspection, quite rightly, they will have to use that day to collect them. And some of it may stray into day 2 in order to extend a period of time to gather the evidence for those areas of focus. And as I said before, those spotlight areas have been removed. So how does this work in practice then? Inspectors use a range of evidence which is provided to them to before the inspection starts, before they get a foot through the door, to actually have a look at the school's context and to look at the data, which looks at a whole series of things, including all of the evidence on the inspection data summary report, the IDSR. So let's just pretend so we've got a school, an imaginary school. Let's call it St. Louise's Catholic Academy, for example. What might an IDSR reveal about St. Louise's? Well, you've got a number on roll. It's a primary school, so 201 pupils on roll, above national for free school meals. You've got well above national for SEND, well above national for children with EHCPs. EAL, very small, it was 0% of EAL a pupil. Absence is above average. Persistent absence is in line with national. So in their phonics results, you had 23 pupils, 6 didn't pass. 3 of the 6 passed in year 2. But when you start looking at things like reading attainment, where it's in line with national at Key Stage 1, but it's below national for Key Stage 2, writing is below national for attainment in Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2, maths is in line for attainment at Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2. So some interesting data there from starting to build up a picture of the school, about the context of the school. So what does the previous inspection report say about the school? Well, it was 2019, it was good, but there's a couple of areas for improvement there. One of them is improve assessment in all subjects. That was one of the recommendations of the previous inspection report. One of the others was to improve attendance. So starting to connect that evidence together, what might we get from the website? Well, the website, with some current data on there, it says that there's been a lot of work on the curriculum. You've got statements for all individual subjects with curriculum intent, implementation. You've got things like progression maps. You've got examples of work, justification, rationale, whole school themes being threaded through. Better in humanities and art than it is in some other subjects. So maybe a work in progress there. Clearly on things like newsletters, sharing with parents and other stakeholders. They're working with other schools to improve attendance and punctuality. There's a comprehensive personal development program there, lots of trips, fundamental British values high on the agenda, school council, lots of things like that on offer for pupils, after school clubs, etc., etc. All policies are compliant and up to date. So we're building up a picture of what the school is like in terms of, so what are the areas of focus going to be possibly? The next thing that a lead inspector might do is to have that educationally focused conversation with leaders, with the head teacher. So again, we're building up that evidence. So from that educationally focused conversation, some key themes have come out from talking to the head teacher and members of the team actually on the call. One of them is that many parents haven't historically supported high attendance at the school, don't see the relevance of education. So the school has begun to challenge that, to have parental meetings and workshops about good attendance. They feel it's essential that parents understand that the curriculum is a really important feature in ensuring that their children get a good start in life. They've told me that they're in the second year of their new phonics program. They've developed their staff understanding and knowledge of how to deliver that phonics program and early reading in the school. Lots of training in CPD. That seems to be going well at the moment. There's been subject CPD also with subject staff to enhance the teaching of different curriculum subjects. Head teacher really believes that attainment is higher in many subjects, particularly in art and geography, where he tells me that practice is stronger. They've had, yes, the numbers of SEND continue to rise. So they've got a new Senko who has really overhauled the whole system for training and development of staff so they can support children appropriately with strategies that mean they can access the curriculum. And one of the last things that the head teachers told me is that there has been a real investment with the support of the trust on the development of personal development program that has led to a much broader offer of trips and experiences that add to students' knowledge of other cultures and faiths and to prepare them for life beyond the school. So I suppose my questions on that, thinking about those areas of focus, what further information have I found out about the school's context from that? Have I found out anything about the impacts of the curriculum? I think I have. Have school leaders been addressing areas that were highlighted as areas of improvement in the last inspection? Well, I think there's some suggestion that they are there, because one of the things that has to be reported on in an ungraded inspection is, to what extent are they providing a good quality of education, and are they acted on those issues that have been highlighted previously? So putting this all together, then, what a lead inspector needs to do is come up with those areas of focus, 3 or 4 areas. They're written in the form of statements, actually, not questions. The lead inspector needs to consider the school's context. They need to stay within the scope of the education inspection framework. There can't be not other things that are not there, because they need to gather evidence which can be judged. But all in all, they must enable inspectors is the school taking effective action? to improve the school? And are these things in the best interest of pupils? Absolutely. Now, leaders may, when the lead inspector comes up with the areas of focus, with it's sort of co-constructed really about how that's going to happen, may disagree, and they want the inspectorate to look at other things the school is doing. So there may be a conversation there about how to steer it back to stay within the remit of these. So I think the ones, if it were me putting together for St. Louise's Academy, I think it'd be these. I think it's about, looking into those strengths and that English and mathematical knowledge, particularly for the most disadvantaged pupils, or that lowest 20%. I would have that one in there as a typical one for primary schools. I want to look at the impact of the curriculum in geography and art, looking at how teachers use assessment. And in order to do that, I mean, I'm not going to share with you what the timetable might look like, but I would have those leaders together. I would talk to the geography leaders and art leaders together about how what's their work been over time. They might want to take me to classes. They might want to walk me through books. They may want to talk to me about other elements of the work they do in school. So there's some real flexibility there about blocking out some time to really get to the heart of the improvements that are being made, rather than that deep dive methodology which dictates what activities need to be done. And finally, I have to look at that. How is the school reducing absence and persistent absence? So, if pupils aren't coming, they can't benefit from that curriculum if they're not there. So as it was in the previous inspection report, as it's probably still not where it needs to be, that's an area I might have as an area of focus. Okay. So in summary, around those ungraded inspections, removal of those deep dives really provides much more opportunity for that deeper professional dialogue, not only with leaders, but with governance as well, with teachers, around the what they've been doing, the strategies they're adopting to address improvement, and actually to talk about the nitty-gritty of what's been done, so that the impact can be investigated through that flexibility and that evidence gathering. That there are more opportunities there to block out time to get to the heart of what's been happening in the school, to look at books, to talk to pupils, to talk to teachers, to talk to leaders, to talk to Senkos. Much greater functionality, flexibility than there has been in the past. A much greater consideration of the school's context, about where the school was, where the school is now, looking really closely at the context of the school, the pupils in it, the location, parental support, whole raft of other things, which some of that documentation that I spoke about there, including the IDSR, provides. And using those focus areas to evaluate, have leaders taken effective action to improve on that school's performance? And that is the thing that's going to be reported on. There's slightly different writing guidance to writing the new ungraded reports than there was in the past, but summing that up, then these are the opportunities it's giving in the inspectorate to without that deep dive methodology. Coming to the end now, just a few further reflections really to think about in terms of what obstacles are people thinking of in terms of this new school inspection framework. Some of them have been mentioned in some of the articles I referred to earlier on. I think there's still going to be, and part of the reason we decided to do this one today was to hopefully provide some clarity around the differences and the changes. I think there's still going to be some potential confusion between the approaches between graded and ungraded moving forward. Hopefully schools are getting some guidance either from their local authorities or their trusts or through federations or about those changes, like hopefully you've got through this today. I think, yeah, there is going to be some confusion about deep dives and what's happening in ungraded. I think there are some concerns about if you're removing those spotlight areas in ungraded, I think this was raised in one of the publications. There's a concern that there'd be a less of a sharp focus on staff workload and well-being, because it used to be very much there at the heart of those spotlight areas in ungraded inspections. I don't think that's going to be the case. It's still very much there in all inspections. That is a key consideration about staff workload and well-being. I don't think that's not disappeared, and it's absolutely crucial to gauge that and the opinions of all stakeholders in schools about workload and how teachers feel supported by their leaders. Don't think that, but there have been concerns raised about that. One of the other concerns that's been raised is one around, are Ofsted overreaching here? Are they telling people not only what needs to be done but how to do it? There's an element of a little bit of do good as you go in inspections, saying what needs to be done and perhaps for people to consider certain options in order to help them. That happens in inspections. Well, Ofsted's long-term plan from 22 to 27 has always talked about a force for improvement. And that continues. It is a force for improvement. Then Ofsted isn't an improvement agency. It's down to teachers, leaders, social workers, others who work in the ground to make those changes. But Ofsted's there to provide regulation and insight that allows those people to make those improvements. Going back to one of the biggest changes, though, is this one about removal of the overall effectiveness. There are probably schools out there who've got their banners somewhere that they aren't able to use yet with "we are a good" or "we're an outstanding school." I don't know whether they're able to return those to get their money back, but I don't know what they're going to do. There is no overall effectiveness judgment anymore moving forward. They might want to put all the other judgments on new banners. I don't know. That's down to the schools, I guess. But I think one of the issues is that it's still going to be like with any massive change, when things are removed or changed, you've got this mindset change. I think the overall effective mindset is going to linger. I think people are going to still be saying, well, what does that mean in old money in terms of overall effectiveness? But overall effectiveness is gone. But I still think there's going to be that legacy of overall effective, where people trying to look back about what it might have said if it had still been in place now. I think that's going to linger for a while. Hopefully not for very long, but I think that is definitely going to be there about overall effectiveness. And for some schools, I've heard speak about it, they didn't want it to go, but many, of course, did. Okay, I think I've rambled on long enough, Louise. I don't know if there's any questions come in that people wanted to ask about anything that's been said there or not.
All right, thank you, Steve. Yeah, we've just got one, and it's from Louise Fisher. Apologies, Louise, if that's not your second name. And her question is around whether which is the most relevant framework for her school to be looking at as they're expecting their inspection later in the year. And the school is an independent special school for students that are 11 to 18. And they've had an Ofsted pre-registration inspection, and as I say, they're expecting their full inspection later on this academic year. So it's which is the most relevant framework for them to be looking at.
So I'm guessing then, Louise, they are not going to be inspected by the ISI. I don't believe they will be inspected by the ISI. What I think the inspection framework they need to be looking at is the non-association independent schools handbook and framework. That seems to me, by the description of the school, they're a special school, did you say?
Yeah. And Louise has just added a further bit of information, and she's saying that they've been told they've got to have Ofsted first.
They've got to have Ofsted first. Well, Ofsted, of course, are the people who do the non-association independent schools inspections. rather than the Independent Schools Inspectorate. So it sounds to me like they're going to get a visit from Ofsted, but they'll be doing it under the non-association independent schools framework and handbook. I hope that helps, which is available if you just Google it. If you're not aware of that, that sounds to me like the one where you're going to get a visit.
And Louise has just responded with perfect, thank you very much. So that's clearly been addressed. So thank you.
I do those ones as well. So yeah, it sounds to me like it's most likely that's going to be the one.
Okay, so thank you, Steve, for that really comprehensive overview and look into the new framework and some of those implications for our schools out there, and some of those sort of golden threads that you talked about being around the commitment to change, and you mentioned the sort of the changes around the process for key pupils, so the SEND pupils. Which brings me nicely on to our next webinar, which is all around provision for SEND pupils, which is taking place on the 21st of November. So if you'd like to join us for that, look out for our social media posts and our emails, etc., inviting you to join that as well. And oh, there's just one more question. It's about the recording, and yet we will be if I could put my teeth in, we will be sharing the recording with delegates afterwards. And if there are any more questions, then we'll pick
please
those up
pose them.
later.
We'll pick those up later.
Yeah,
that's fine. Yeah.
Okay. Well,
Thanks.
I know these people are all busy people from schools and colleges, so 10 minutes is precious, and we will give you 10 minutes back of your time. Thank you everyone for joining us, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks very much.